开场就是震惊北美的水牛比尔剥皮案，在短短数月，凶手接连残害了5名花季少女，受害者死前会被扼上3天，等待皮肤松弛，凶手会残忍剥下他们的皮肤。当警方介入调查后，案件却迟迟没有进展。联邦调查局得知此事，指派实习探员克里斯去见一位囚犯，对方或许可以提供凶手的线索。
I want you to go after him again today in the asylum.
Who's the subject?
The psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal the cannibal.
汉尼拔有着超高的智商，是个极度危险的重刑犯，很多接近他的护士全都被咬掉了舌头。虽然克里斯有些害怕，但还是强装镇定地来到了精神病院。接待他的是汉尼拔的主治医生齐顿医生，介绍了一些注意事项。克里斯这才意识到自己要见的囚犯是有多么的恐怖。
On the afternoon of July 8, 1981, he complained of chest pains and was taken to the dispensary. His mouthpiece and restraints were removed for an EKG. When the nurse leaned over him, he did this to her. The doctors managed to reset her jaw, more or less, save one of her eyes. His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
经过无数道铁门，克里斯来到了关押地点。映入眼帘的是脏乱的环境和囚犯的一些污言秽语。在牢房的尽头，克里斯看到了传说中的汉尼拔，他浑身上下散发着优雅的气质，完全没有变态食人魔该有的样子。克里斯表明了自己的来意，他很快便见识到了汉尼拔的可怕之处。
Oh, Agent Starling, you think you can dissect me with this blunt little tool?
No. I thought that your knowledge...
You're so ambitious, aren't you? Do you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes? You look like a rube, a well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Good nutrition's given you some length of bone, but you're not more than one generation from poor white trash. What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land? You know how quickly the boys found you, all those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars, while you could only dream of getting out, getting all the way to the end.
克里斯试图转移话题，可汉尼拔接下来的话却让他顿时汗毛直立。
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
短短几分钟，克里斯的内心就被扒了个精光。就在他失望的离开时，再次遭到了囚犯的侮辱。汉尼拔赶忙将他叫了回来，让他去找自己曾经的一位病人墨菲小姐。这条线索将是侦破水牛比尔案件的关键所在。克里斯走出精神病院，回想汉尼拔刚才的一番话，让他回忆起了童年时期的痛苦经历，而这段经历也是他一生都无法打开的心结。可眼下最重要的就是侦破案件。当克里斯回到联邦调查局，却得知了一个惊人的消息：那名侮辱他的囚犯竟然咬舌自尽，只因汉尼拔隔着牢房和他讲了几句话。克里斯顿时被吓到。随后，他根据汉尼拔提供的线索，找到了一家仓库。房东告诉他，墨菲小姐曾支付了10年的租金，可自从1980年就再也没见她来过。克里斯拿着手电筒钻进了仓库，里面堆满了人体模型以及一些动物标本。随着克里斯往深处走去，赫然发现了恐怖的一幕。只见一颗人头浸泡在福尔马林中，脸上还画着浓妆，这很可能是水牛比尔的杰作。克里斯急忙来到精神病院，再次找到了汉尼拔。他询问那颗人头是谁，汉尼拔表示那是他以前的病人赖普，是墨菲小姐的真名，他的爱人是个同性恋。但狡猾的汉尼拔并没有告诉他，赖普的爱人就是水牛比尔。他直接转移话题，答应克里斯会帮助他破案，但条件是必须帮他换一家监狱。
What I want is a view. I want a window where I can see a tree, or even water. I want to be in a federal institution far away from Dr. Children.
汉尼拔还表示，水牛比尔很快会寻找新的猎物，留给他们的时间已经不多了。与此同时，一场新的命案即将上演。女孩正准备回家，发现不远处的男人正奋力地搬着沙发。她好心上前帮忙，可这一善举却害了自己的性命。男人正是警方一直在寻找的水牛比尔。他剪开女孩的衣服，满意地看着眼前的猎物。直到1周后，女孩的尸体被警方发现。经过尸检得知，女孩被凶手饿了3天，等待皮肤松弛，将其开枪射杀，然后残忍地剥下了皮肤，最终被抛尸在了河流中。克里斯断定，凶手应该有自己的住所，并且是个自控力很强的人，因为这些女孩生前并没有遭到侵犯。看来凶手的目的非常明确。上司带着克里斯来到了验尸房，只见死者背部缺失了2块菱形的皮肤，指甲也有明显的断裂，这似乎是他生前徒手攀爬造成的。法医还在死者的口中取出了一只昆虫，看样子应该是茧蛹。 克里斯找到了昆虫专家，对其进行了辨认。这是一种名叫骷髅飞蛾的幼虫，一般生长在亚洲。如果没猜错的话，应该是凶手在人工饲养它。然而一波未平一波又起，水牛比尔再次绑架了一名女孩，她是参议员的独生女，名叫凯瑟琳。由于身份的特殊性，此消息很快便登上了新闻。参议员隔空喊话，祈求凶手放过自己的孩子。画面来到水牛比尔这边，他强迫凯瑟琳往身上涂抹润肤液，然后将润肤液放进篮子里。伴随着灯光的照射，凯瑟琳发现了墙壁上攀爬的血迹，这正是之前受害者留下的。为了阻止水牛比尔，克里斯再次找到了汉尼拔。他告诉对方，如果能抓住水牛比尔，救出凯瑟琳，参议员会答应帮他转送到环境更好的监狱，并且每年给他1周时间去小岛度假。听完克里斯的讲述，汉尼拔提出了新的条件。
Quid pro quo. I tell you things, you tell me things. Not about this case, though. About yourself.
Go, Doctor.
What is your worst memory of childhood?
Death of my father. He was a town marshal, and one night he surprised 2 burglars coming out of the back of a drugstore. They shot him.
Was he killed outright?
No, he was very strong. He lasted more than a month. My mother died when I was very young, so my father had become the whole world to me. And when he left me, I had nothing. I was 10 years old.
After your father's murder, you were orphaned. What happened next?
I went to live with my mother's cousin and her husband in Montana. They had a ranch.
How long did you live there?
2 months.
Why so briefly?
I ran away.
Why, Clarice? Did the rancher make you perform fellatio? Did he sodomize you?
No. He was a very decent man. Quid pro quo, Doctor.
作为信息交换，汉尼拔询问了关于受害者的细节。当得知死者口中的茧蛹，汉尼拔明白了其中的缘由。骷髅飞蛾象征着蜕变，而水牛比尔同样渴望蜕变。他有着不为人知的悲惨童年，所以才痴迷于变性来摆脱童年阴影。汉尼拔万万没想到，奇顿医生在监听他们的对话。克里斯离开后，奇顿医生来到了牢房，他试图逼问出凶手的下落，救出凯瑟琳，向参议员索要功劳。可汉尼拔却将目光锁定在了一支钢笔上，并开始了自己的逃跑计划。
His first name is Lewis. I told the rest of the senator herself, but only in Tennessee.
很快，汉尼拔如愿以偿被转送至田纳西州，将暂时关押在法院大楼内。作为交换，汉尼拔将凶手的信息告诉了参议员。
Buffalo Bill's real name is Louis Friend. I met him just once. He was referred to me in April or May 1980 by my patient Benjamin Raspel. They were lovers, you see. But Raspel had become very frightened. Apparently, Louis had murdered a transient for the skin. 5'10", strongly built, about 180 pounds. Hair blonde, eyes pale blue. He'd be about 35 now. He said he lived in Philadelphia, but may have lied. That's all I can remember, Mom.
趁着记者正在采访，克里斯再次来找汉尼拔。由于不在自己的管辖范围，当地警方只给他10分钟的时间。这里的关押环境显然比之前要好太多。克里斯知道路易是法兰是个假名字。被拆穿谎言的汉尼拔不但没有生气，反而还教克里斯如何分析水牛比尔。
What does he do, this man you seek?
He kills women.
No, that is incidental. What is the first and principal thing he does? What needs does he serve by killing?
Anger. Social acceptance and sexual frustrations.
No, he covets. That is his nature. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice? Do we seek out things to covet? Make an effort to answer now.
No. We just...
Now, we begin by coveting what we see every day. Don't you feel eyes moving over your body, Clarice? And don't your eyes seek out the things you want?
All right, yes. And please tell me how.
No. It's your turn to tell me, Clarice. Why did you leave that ranch?
没想到汉尼拔再次追问起了克里斯的童年，而克里斯的回答也告诉了观众，电影的名字为何会叫《沉默的羔羊》。
You went to live with cousins on a sheep and horse ranch in Montana. And
And one morning I just ran away.
Not just, Clarice. What set you off? You started at what time?
Early, it's still dark.
Then something woke you, didn't it? Was it a dream? What was it?
I heard a strange noise.
What was it?
Screaming. Some kind of screaming, like a child's voice.
What did you do?
I went downstairs, outside. I crept up into the barn. I was so scared to look inside, but I had to.
What did you see, Clarice? What did you see?
Lamb. They were screaming.
They were slaughtering the spring lambs?
They were screaming.
And you ran away?
No. First I tried to free them. I opened the gate to their pen, but they wouldn't run. It just stood there. Confused. They wouldn't run.
But you could, and you did, didn't you?
Yes. I took one lamb and I ran away as fast as I could.
Where were you going, Clarice?
I don't know. I didn't have any food, any water, and it was very cold. Very cold. I thought if I could save just one, but he was so heavy. I didn't get more than a few miles, and the sheriff's car picked me up. Rancher was so angry, he sent me to live at the Lutheran orphanage, postman. I never saw the ranch again.
What became of your lamb, Clarice?
They killed him.
You still wake up sometimes, don't you? Wake up in the dark and hear the screaming of the lamb.
Yes.
And you think if you save poor Catherine, you could make them stop, don't you? You think if Catherine lives, you won't wake up in the dark ever again to that awful screaming of the lamb.
I don't know.
Thank you, Clarice.
Tell me his name, Doctor.
汉尼拔并没有告诉他凶手的名字。转眼，探视时间已到，狱警和奇顿医生打断了两人的对话。
Brave Clarice, you will let me know when those lambs stop screaming, won't you?
Tell me his name, Doctor.
Clarice! Your case file. Goodbye, Clarice.
而接下来，汉尼拔开始了自己的逃跑计划，贡献了一段教科书级别的演技。趁着两名狱警前来送饭，按照惯例，他们会将汉尼拔铐在牢笼上。当狱警打开牢房，汉尼拔拿出了钢笔的笔芯。伴随着录音机里的音乐，食人魔汉尼拔表现得优雅而又淡定。当楼下大批警察赶来时，其中一名狱警已经被高高挂起，而另一名狱警则奄奄一息地躺在地上。此时的汉尼拔早已不知去向。警方立刻封锁了整栋大楼，由于通往楼下只有一部电梯，警察断定汉尼拔并没有离开。当他们将奄奄一息的狱警送往楼下时，却发现电梯上面滴出了血液，汉尼拔很可能藏在这里。当一名警察打开隔板，却发现是死掉的狱警。而此时的救护车上，汉尼拔缓缓坐起身，他利用狱警的脸皮，成功骗过了所有人的视线。随着汉尼拔的逃脱，克里斯根据他之前说过的话，找到了一些线索。
First girl taken, third body found. Why?
Well, she didn't drift. He weighted her down.
What did Lecter say about the first principles?
Simplicity.
What does this guy do? He covets. How do we first start to covet?
We covet what we see.
Every day.
所以克里斯断定，凶手一定认识第一个受害者。顺着这条线索，克里斯开始了自己的调查。他来到了被害女孩的家中，当打开衣柜时，发现了一件菱形裁剪的衣服，结合女孩背部的菱形皮肤，克里斯断定凶手很可能是个裁缝，并且在用死者的皮肤做衣服。而此时的联邦调查局已经根据汉尼拔提供的相貌特征，锁定了凶手的画像，现在正前往芝加哥抓捕凶手。克里斯很清楚，汉尼拔提供了假信息，可他却无法阻止上司，毕竟没人会相信一个实习探员的判断。克里斯走访了受害者的闺蜜，得知死者曾在利普曼太太家做过裁缝。克里斯很快锁定了利普曼的住所， 与此同时，警方抵达了芝加哥，准备抓捕凶手。导演运用了空间蒙太奇的剪辑手法。警方按动门铃后，水牛比尔听到了声响，可当他打开门，门外却是克里斯。克里斯并不知道眼前的男人就是水牛比尔。而另一边，警察破门而入，房间内却空无一人。上司这才意识到克里斯有危险，但此时的克里斯已经来到了屋内。他环顾四周，发现了骷髅飞蛾，瞬间意识到眼前的男人就是水牛比尔。
Freeze! Put your hands over your head and turn around. Spread your legs. Spread your legs. Put your hands in the back. Thumbs up. Freeze!
克里斯一路追赶，发现对方逃进了地下室。导演将这里的紧张氛围烘托到了极致。随着克里斯不断的深入，听到了女孩的求救声。可眼下他顾不上营救凯瑟琳，必须尽快抓住凶手。当克里斯寻找到一处房间，发现利普曼太太早已死在了浴缸中。伴随着灯光突然熄灭，水牛比尔打开了夜视仪。此时的克里斯犹如一只待宰的羔羊。在这场对决中，水牛比尔被当场击毙。事后，克里斯得到了上司的嘉奖，正式成为了一名高级探员。在庆功宴上，克里斯接到了一通电话。
Have the lamb stopped screaming?
Dr. Lecter.
Don't bother with the trace. I won't be on long enough.
Where are you, Dr. Lecter?
I have no plans to call on you, Clarice. The world's more interesting with you in it. So you take care now to extend me the same courtesy.
You know I can't make that promise.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.
Dr. Lecter.
这里提到的老朋友正是奇顿医生。很显然，他要把这位朋友当做自己的晚餐。随着汉尼拔跟随着奇顿医生消失在人群中，剧情也到此结束。接下来，我们聊聊这部电影的海报。将骷髅飞蛾放大后，会发现它是由几个女人组成，这也代表着那些被水牛比尔残害的女性。沉默的羔羊属于经典的心理悬疑电影。羔羊在剧中有着多重含义。首先是克里斯童年时期目睹羊群的尖叫，那些待宰的羔羊像极了现实中的自己。导演运用了大量语言镜头，身材矮小的克里斯与男同事形成了鲜明的对比。克里斯渴望被认可，但现实却只能任由他人宰割。其次是被水牛比尔残害的女性，她们在地牢中拼命的尖叫，却依然没能躲过被杀的命运。只有沉默的羔羊变得不再沉默，牧场的羊群才能停止尖叫，克里斯才能战胜内心的阴影，阻止水牛比尔继续杀戮。导演正是通过深度的隐喻和心理探讨，展现出了人性的复杂。反观这部电影的人物特点，克里斯和水牛比尔存在着相同之处，他们都有着一段童年时期的心理创伤，渴望像飞蛾一样完成蜕变。克里斯将过去埋藏在心底，等待着自我救赎，直到汉尼拔的出现，让他完成了蜕变。而水牛比尔试图通过变形来摆脱过往，却遭到医院的拒绝。他不惜剥下女人的皮肤做成衣服，以此来寻求内心的满足。同样是蜕变，克里斯和水牛比尔的人生走向却截然不同。为了抓住一个变态，让实习探员去求助另一个变态，这看似荒谬的设定，却充满了十足的讽刺。导演利用沉默的羔羊到底想表达什么？是为了控诉当下社会的罪恶，确立女性的地位，还是为了推崇犯罪心理学？我认为这些并不重要。导演其实是想传达一种希望，希望所有沉默的羔羊不再沉默，正如剧中的克里斯一样，勇敢去面对内心的创伤，让自己走出阴霾。